Welcome to the debate. Picture a massive, impenetrable bank vault sitting right in the center of a bustling financial district. Behind, reinforced glass and feet of solid steel, there sits hundreds of billions of dollars in pure capital. You can walk right up to the glass and you can verify every single dollar is exactly where it's supposed to be.
Right, it's transparent.
Exactly. You know it is perfectly, undeniably secure. But there is a massive problem. The door to this vault has been welded completely shut. Because it's isolated, you cannot generate any yield on that capital. You can't use it to collateralize loans, and you can't plug it into the complex, fast-moving plumbing that modern decentralized finance actually runs on.
Yeah, it's just stuck there.
Right. The capital is perfectly secure, yes, but it is entirely, fundamentally dormant.
And that right there is the core paradox of single-purpose, highly secured ledgers. I mean, they are absolutely magnificent at tracking who owns what with perfect precision. But without native smart contract depth, without a way to actually program that money, that massive store of value stays completely isolated from the broader decentralized economy.
Exactly. And in this case, that gold we're talking about is XRP sitting on the XRP Ledger. So today, we're looking at a fascinating technological endeavor designed to fix this.
Which is long overdue, frankly.
Yeah. We are debating whether the Flare network, utilizing an EVM-compatible architecture, meaning it runs the same standardized smart contract operating system that made Ethereum famous, can sustainably unlock the XRPL ecosystem for advanced DeFi and the emerging machine-to-machine economy.
Or, conversely, if this ambition is just going to fall flat.
Right. I argue that Flare provides a mathematically sound, decentralized collateral pillar that effectively puts dormant XRP to work safely and securely.
And I argue that while the architecture looks incredibly elegant on a whiteboard, market realities like heavy hardware cost, institutional preference for stablecoins, and severe latency bottlenecks will make the ecosystem's durability highly questionable.
To really understand this, we have to look at how Flare approaches the welded vault problem. It's not just another bridge trying to wrap tokens and move them around.
Which usually ends badly anyway.
Which usually ends terribly, yeah. Flare fundamentally changes how data and value interact by enshrining data acquisition directly into its base layer consensus.
I come at it from a different way. That technical elegance, enshrining data into consensus, is undeniably impressive on paper. But engineering brilliance does not automatically translate to market adoption.
But that engineering is exactly what sets the table for adoption. Think about validators on Flare. They don't just order transactions like they do on most chains. They are forced to provide accurate external data through the Flare Time Series Oracle, or the FTSO, which pushes price updates roughly every 1.8 seconds. It's built right into the engine block. So by using these native oracles alongside heavily collateralized synthetic assets, called F-assets, Flare can safely pull that XRP out of isolation without centralizing risk.
Right, but you're jumping straight to the synthetic assets without looking at the massive friction they introduce. In market reality, this stack is going to struggle immensely.
First, there's an overwhelming institutional preference for dollar-backed stablecoins, specifically Ripple's own RLUSD over synthetic crypto collateral. Second, on-chain XRPL activity often resembles a static compliance filing cabinet rather than a pool of active flowing liquidity. And finally, the technological upgrades being sold as the ultimate solution here introduce dangerous cost and governance unknowns for the validators, keeping this whole thing alive.
All right, let's dig right into that friction you're talking about, because the mechanics of how F-assets like XRP function is really the crux of the security design. To get that dormant XRP out of the vault, you lock it on its native ledger.
Okay.
Then, a decentralized agent mints a one-to-one representation, FXRP, on the Flare network. But here is how we avoid the bridge hacks that have stolen billions in this industry.
The protocol forces that minting agent to lock their own collateral on Flare. We are talking about requiring 250% to 300% of the bridged assets value in FLR tokens.
Wait, let me pause you right there, because if I'm listening to this at the gym or on my commute, my head is spinning a bit.
Fair enough.
You're saying if I want to move $100 of XRP into the Flare ecosystem, an agent has to lock up $300 of FLR just to secure it?
Yes.
Walk me through the exact math and logic of why that massive ratio is necessary. Because economically, requiring 3 times the capital merely to move the original capital sounds like a massive friction point.
It sounds high, but it's entirely necessary to neutralize the economic incentive for theft. I mean, if I'm an agent holding the keys to your $100 of XRP, I might be tempted to just run away with it.
Sure.
But if I have $300 of my own capital locked in a smart contract that gets slashed the moment I act maliciously, or the moment the collateral value dips too low, my incentive to steal is mathematically destroyed.
Right. Because you lose more than you gain.
Exactly. The protocol uses those sub-2-second FTSO Oracle updates to constantly monitor the prices. If the agent's collateral ratio drops, the system instantly liquidates that pool. The user is made more than whole.
Okay, but...
You aren't trusting a few guys with a multi-signature wallet to not get hacked. You are trusting an over-collateralized, mathematically rigorous liquidation engine.
I understand the security mechanism, but you cannot ignore the capital inefficiency of it. If I'm an institutional player, that inefficiency translates directly to cost. Furthermore, you have to look at the macro current surrounding the underlying asset here. Independent analysis shows Ripple's escrow is dropping from roughly 55 billion tokens toward about 38 billion over time. The promotional scaffold of the ecosystem is shifting.
Sure, the macro is changing.
But more importantly, traditional institutions are not shopping for over-collateralized synthetic crypto. They want regulated, non-volatile fiat stability on a ledger. Look at RLUSD. I mean, it has rapidly approached a $1.5 billion market cap.
Yeah, it's grown fast.
Corporate treasuries want dollars. They do not want XRP volatility dressed up as FXRP.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. You are treating RLUSD and FXRP as if they are in a zero-sum competition, fighting for the same institutional dollar.
Well, aren't they?
No, that fundamentally misreads how these instruments interact in a mature DeFi ecosystem. RLUSD is not the competitor to the FXRP engine, it is the output.
The output? How so?
Look at institutionally curated lending patterns. Take a highly specific real-world example like the Morpho or Centaura RLUSD vault patterns.
Okay.
If you're an institution holding a massive amount of XRP, you don't want to sell it and trigger a taxable event or lose your position. So what do? You use the F-Asset system to mint FXRP, you deposit that FXRP into one of these smart contract vaults, and you use it as the primary collateral to borrow RLUSD. We've seen on the order of 150 million FXRP supply live in these exact flows.
So they are essentially taking out a dollar loan against their crypto?
Exactly. This is how the dormant vault is put to work. RLUSD growth doesn't cannibalize FXRP, it provides the exact desirable stable asset that users want to borrow against their FXRP. It allows holders to access dollar liquidity for their daily operations, payroll, or external investments without having to sell their underlying XRP.
That symbiosis is a clever mechanism, I'll give you that. But it assumes the engine room actually has organic fuel to keep running.
Meaning?
Your entire 300% safety net. That mathematical guarantee you mentioned earlier rests on one foundational requirement. The FLR token itself must hold its value against the assets it is securing.
Of course.
If FLR drops in value, that 300% buffer vanishes, triggering mass liquidations. So we have to ask, how does Flare maintain FLR's value?
Through the deflationary flywheel, FIRE.
Right, FIRE, the Flare Income Reinvestment Entity. And let's explain how that actually works for the listener.
Go ahead.
FIRE takes network revenue, which comes from transaction fees and miner extractable value, or MEV. And MEV is essentially the profit validators and searchers make by legally reordering transactions in a block to capture arbitrage opportunities.
Exactly.
FIRE takes those fees in MEV, uses them to buy FLR on the open market, and burns it. But here is the fatal flaw. A flywheel only spins if the revenue is real.
Well, it is real.
And this brings us back to the reality of the XRP ledger. Billions in real-world asset value can sit on a ledger and still behave entirely like a compliance filing cabinet.
Hold on, I need you to unpack that. A compliance filing cabinet? That sounds incredibly harsh for a ledger securing tens of billions of dollars.
What does that actually look like in practice?
You can have large commercial energy contracts, tokenized real estate, or complex financial derivatives registered on a chain. They represent enormous total value locked, or TVL.
Right. Huge TVL.
But they have near zero transfer activity. They function as immutable audit records. The institution wants the cryptographic proof of ownership, but the assets themselves never move.
Okay, I follow.
And here is why that breaks your system. If they never move, there is zero velocity. No velocity means no AMM trades, no liquidations, no transaction fees, and no MEV.
Which starves fire.
Exactly. Without those fees, fire has no fuel to buy and burn FLR. Without sustained burns, the FLR token weakens against XRP. Suddenly, that 3 times collateral evaporates. Agents are forced into liquidation, the system deleverages, and you risk a cascading run on the whole architecture. Velocity, not static TVL, is the actual lifeblood of this security budget.
The distinction between total value locked and true velocity is incredibly important, and you are entirely right to highlight it. A purely static network cannot fund its own security budget indefinitely.
Right.
But your cascade scenario severely underestimates the operational discipline that Flare imposes on its validators, which is exactly what sets the stage for capturing that future velocity. You have to look at FIP10.
The validator penalty regime.
Yes. It's a ruthless 3-strike regime for validators. On Flare, validators are not just passive actors running a node in their basement and collecting yield.
No, they have real responsibilities.
Because they are the oracle, they must accurately feed external price data, verify cross-chain events, and produce blocks reliably. If they fail to meet minimum accuracy thresholds, if their data is slightly off or they miss a window, they literally lose passes. Lose enough, and they completely forfeit their rewards. This strict discipline ensures the absolute integrity of the liquidation engine, preventing the very failure under stress you are predicting.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered that professional integrity is simply a baseline expectation, not an economic catalyst?
What do you mean?
FIP10 ensures the guards are awake, yes. It means they are paying attention. But integrity without flow is just a well-run museum.
A museum?
Yes. A highly disciplined validator set guarding a static pile of assets still doesn't generate the transaction fees required to fuel fire. You still have a velocity problem.
Which is exactly why the network isn't just resting on its current architecture. It's introducing specific base layer technological upgrades designed specifically to pull those static assets into feed-generating circulation.
Okay, here we go.
Let's talk about Flare 2.0 and the integration of trusted execution environments, or TEEs.
This is where things get very complicated and frankly very expensive.
Let's break it down simply. A TEE is a hardware isolated lockbox inside a computer processor. It is so secure that even the owner of the physical machine, the system administrator, cannot see or alter the data being processed inside it.
Right, it's a black box.
By deploying TEEs across the validator set, Flare essentially transforms from a highly accurate weather station reporting prices into a universal remote for other blockchains.
A universal remote?
Yeah. Smart contracts running inside these confidential compute enclaves can securely generate and hold private keys for wallets on entirely separate chains, whether that's Bitcoin, Ethereum, or the XRPL. And it does this without relying on a centralized bridge custodian.
Meaning the TEE executes the cross-chain logic autonomously.
Exactly. You can observe a condition on the XRPL via those enshrined oracles, compute the logic securely inside the TEE, and execute a transaction on Ethereum, all seamlessly.
Okay, on paper, yes.
This accountability layer is exactly how you take those static, compliant assets and underwrite cross-chain DeFi strategies that generate the velocity and fees you're looking for.
Yeah, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. Conceptually, it is brilliant. I will grant that hardware enclaves integrated directly into consensus are a genuine innovation for cross-chain execution.
Thank you.
But let us look at the real-world opacity of the capital expenditure, the CapEx shock, this introduces. Right now, TE capability is largely voluntary. But if it becomes mandated to secure this universal remote validator, costs are going to skyrocket at the worst possible macroeconomic moment.
Because of the AI boom?
Precisely. The global AI industry is currently driving up silicon and memory costs across the entire supply spectrum. They are scrambling for NVIDIA chips, advanced memory, and the exact same high-end hardware capabilities required for secure enclaves.
That is true, the demand is high.
Nobody publishing a Flare roadmap slide actually knows the exact price of a production-ready TEE server once private operators are fully forced into scope. Furthermore, typical validator profit margins are entirely private. We, as outside observers, cannot even stress test whether these validators can survive this CapEx shock. A sudden governance vote mandating TEEs, a newly discovered security flaw in a popular chip family that requires hardware replacement, or another AI-driven spike in memory prices could rewrite validator economics overnight.
It's a valid concern, but
You are asking us to trust the fortress, but the guards don't even know what their armor will cost next year. We need concrete baselines and strict phase-in rules before we can assign high confidence to TEs.
I'll give you that. Hardware isn't cheap. I will not pretend that hardware CapEx is free. But we have to look at what running a professional network actually means in the real world.
Which is?
This was never meant to be a laptop hobby. The FIP10 regime we discussed already selects for operators who have the capital and technical proficiency to run serious enterprise infrastructure. A phased, initially voluntary TEE path allows capable validators to price in the security premium while the network simultaneously proves its utility and generates revenue.
But the opportunity cost of that hardware investment is massive.
Look at the alternative. Over-collateralization and hardware lockboxes look expensive right up until you price in the devastating history of bridge hacks in this industry.
Well, true, hacks are worse.
Security that is cheap on paper but hollow in production is not a bargain, it is a massive liability. Paying a premium for a real hardware lockbox is vastly superior to trusting a multi-sig wallet where 3 out of 5 developers can get socially engineered.
Fair point.
Or, returning to our initial metaphor, it's vastly superior to leaving hundreds of billions of dollars economically idle in a welded vault. The cost of hardware is real, but the opportunity cost of an isolated ledger is infinitely higher.
That is a well-articulated defense of the security premium, but it still doesn't resolve my core objection regarding the opaque economics.
How so?
You are asking the market to blindly underwrite an upgrade path where the unit economics are unknown, while directly competing against trillion-dollar AI budgets for silicon. Until those proposals make the cost curve completely legible, the universal remote is just a roadmap claim attached to a blank invoice.
I think the transparency will come as the voluntary rollout progresses.
But let's assume, for the sake of argument, that the hardware gets deployed perfectly and the universal remote is handed over to the market.
Okay.
What market is actually going to use it? Because the next massive stress test for this entire industry is the agentic economy. AI agents querying, deciding, and transferring value continuously and autonomously.
Right, machine to machine.
And structurally, the Flare stack is simply too slow to capture where the deepest, fastest liquidity will inevitably concentrate.
Too slow? Walk me through the latency metrics you believe disqualify the stack, because sub-2-second Oracle updates are incredibly fast by historical blockchain standards.
It comes down to sequential versus parallel processing. Let's look at the plumbing. The XRPL ledger close is roughly 3 to 5 seconds.
Yes.
The Flare FTSO pushes data about every 1.8 seconds with each block. That is perfectly fine for human payments or settling a daily commercial energy contract. But it is entirely obsolete for high-frequency parallel AI agent swarms.
Why obsolete?
Because you are competing against parallel chains like SUI. They use object-centric parallel execution.
Okay, explain that for a second.
That means independent transactions process simultaneously in separate lanes, rather than waiting in a single-file line at an EVM toll booth, which is what Flare relies on. On those parallel chains, finality is often near 400 milliseconds.
That is fast.
Right. Pair that with Pyth-style pull oracles. A pull oracle means the smart contract fetches the latest signed data exactly at the millisecond of execution, rather than waiting around for Flare's 1.8-second global push cadence.
I see.
That combination is several times faster. An AI agent facing a sudden market dislocation is going to treat a 1.8-second oracle delay plus a multi-second settlement time as an absolute eternity. It will get arbitraged into oblivion.
Latency-sensitive machine-to-machine flows simply will not wait for Flare and XRPL.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because you are vastly over-indexing on peak latency, and you're misreading the broader, practical machine economy.
Really?
Yes. Parallel versus sequential is a real architectural distinction, and yes, pull oracles are incredibly fast. But high-frequency arbitrage, the kind of cutthroat sub-second bot trading you are describing, is just the tip of the spear.
But it's where the volume is.
Today, maybe. But look at where we are going. If you're an autonomous electric vehicle negotiating a charging rate with a station while you sleep, does a 1.5-second delay actually matter?
Well, no.
No. Most practical, high-value autonomous agent use cases do not actually require 400-millisecond settlement. Think about IoT micropayments, complex supply chain settlements, or smart grid energy routing.
Right. Industrial use cases.
For those massive, moderate-frequency workflows, a 3 to 5 second deterministic finality is ideal. And we should briefly note XRPL uses Federated Byzantine Agreement, a consensus model that prioritizes absolute deterministic finality over raw speed.
Transactions don't get rolled back.
Exactly. When you combine that certainty with the unshakable base layer security of the FTSO, it is not just fast enough, it is operationally appropriate. You need transactions that do not surprise revert more than you need a racing stopwatch.
But fast enough rarely wins long-term technology races. History is littered with tech stacks that thought they were operationally appropriate right before they were rendered obsolete by faster, more efficient architectures.
It's a risk, sure.
I will grant that XRPL and Flare might carve out a functional niche for those moderate-frequency, high-reliability workflows you just mentioned, the smart grids and the supply chains, but I will not grant them the highest value, most demanding sectors of the autonomous financial economy.
Because of the speed?
Because of the compounding risks. And this concession brings us right back to the structural fragility we discussed earlier.
Okay, tie it together.
If the fastest, most lucrative AI flow migrates to parallel chains, and heavy institutional cash continues to prefer native RLUSD over synthetic XRP, and the TEE hardware economics remain opaque or punitive for validators, then the vital fee velocity never arrives.
And if the velocity never arrives,
What remains to drive the fire flywheel? You risk building a brilliant, heavily collateralized security system that merely guards an illiquid set of compliance records staffed by validators staring at blank invoices from mandatory silicon.
that is a bleak picture.
A slower stack burdened by opaque costs and static assets is a massive systemic risk.
And that outlines the exact tension of this entire technological endeavor, especially as these ecosystems try to find sustainability in a world of incredibly rapid technological change.
It really does.
When we look at all of this together, my stance hasn't changed. Flare has successfully delivered the blowtorch, the combination and the rails to finally open that welded vault. We are not dealing in hypotheticals anymore.
The strict mathematical design of the FXAD system, utilizing that massive safety net, fundamentally neutralizes the bridge vulnerabilities that have held the industry back. And we are already seeing working institutional patterns where FXRP is actively utilized to borrow RLUSD, proving that this collateral pillar is productive.
Yes, we are seeing some of that.
Combine that with the rigorous professional validation standards of FIP10 and the rollout of TEE hardware lockboxes, and you have a highly secure environment built for the practical machine-to-machine economy. The infrastructure to put dormant ledger balances to work is live, secure, and economically sound.
I hear you, but for me, the fundamental risk remains market reality. Elegant engineering simply does not guarantee market adoption. The mechanics of assets and TEEs are fascinating, but the preference for regulated native dollar stablecoins is clearly outpacing the appetite for complex synthetic crypto collateral. The fundamental lack of on-chain velocity remains a glaring issue. I mean, XRPL still operates more like a static compliance tracking system than a fee-rich financial engine.
It needs to evolve, yeah.
And when you compound that lack of organic fuel with the severe bottleneck of multi-second sequential latency, trying to compete against sub-second parallel stacks, The system's ability to capture the future AI economy is doubtful at best. Add in the blank invoice of mandatory TE hardware costs during a global AI silicon crunch, and the ecosystem looks highly vulnerable.
So it's still a filing cabinet.
An elegant security system built around a filing cabinet is still just a filing cabinet if the market never steps through the door.
It is absolutely clear that this debate isn't going to be settled by architectural theories or dueling white papers. The outcome will be decided by hard, organic, on-chain metrics over the next few years.
Exactly right. We will have to watch the actual locked amounts of XRP. We need to monitor the utilization rates of RLUSD versus crypto-backed collateral and see if those massive compliance-style records on Xrpl ever transition into transferable fee-generating velocity.
That's the real test.
We also have to wait for concrete timelines and transparent cost envelopes regarding those TEE hardware mandates. The data will tell the true story.
And we encourage everyone listening to look deeply at that data themselves. Watch the metrics closely and hold these opposing perspectives in tension as the ecosystem matures. We end right where we began, staring at a massive, impenetrable bank vault in the center of the financial district, loaded with dormant capital. Flare has laid down the rails and fired up the blowtorch. The only question now is whether the market is ready to step inside.